Imagine a nation where the average worker feels silenced, where hard-fought freedoms hang in the balance, and where a 75-year-old cancer survivor is rallying not just for himself, but for everyone who's ever been overlooked or oppressed. That's the heart of the No Kings protests sweeping America. And it's a story that's begging you to dig deeper. But here's the twist. These aren't just random outbursts. They're being orchestrated by some of the biggest labor unions in the U.S., turning a personal fight into a nationwide movement. And this is the part most people miss. How history's echoes are fueling today's outrage against what feels like a return to unchecked power. Buckle up, because we're about to explore why a post-surgery veteran activist is hitting the streets, and why unions are calling it out as a battle for democracy itself. James Phipps, a spry 75-year-old from Marks, Mississippi, isn't letting a recent colon cancer surgery keep him sidelined from Saturday's No Kings rally in Chicago, Illinois. "I've got this fierce passion to join the protest," he shares, "because standing up for what's right has basically defined my entire life." Born in the Deep South, Phipps dove into the civil rights movement back in the 1960s, starting at just 13 years old. That meant being on the front lines to desegregate his local high school and teaming up with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, a group dedicated to peaceful change through grassroots organizing. By 15, he was deeply involved with the Mississippi Freedom Labor Union, MFLU, which rallied sharecroppers, farm workers who toiled on plantations, to demand fair pay and better conditions. To put this in perspective, for beginners, sharecropping was a system where farmers worked land owned by others, often trapping them in debt and poverty. The MFLU focused on organizing cotton pickers, who back then earned a meager 30 cents an hour, laboring under the scorching sun for 10 hours a day. That's just $3 for a full shift, or about 2.5 cents per pound of cotton harvested. It wrecked their bodies, necks, backs, pelvises, and knees all suffered, Phipps recalls. And forget about medical care. That was a luxury they couldn't afford. In his mind today, those memories tie directly to current struggles, highlighting how systemic neglect can cripple lives. Now, Phipps works in administrative support for Cook County and is a proud member of SEIU Local 73, a union for public service employees. He's grateful that his health insurance covered his recent cancer operation, but he's frustrated by the ongoing federal government shutdown. This deadlock stems from Democrats pushing Republicans to tackle recent cuts to Medicaid under President Donald Trump and to extend health insurance subsidies set to vanish by year's end. Without those extensions, premiums could skyrocket, potentially leaving around 3.1 million Americans uninsured, a statistic that underscores the human cost of political gridlock. You've got selfish individuals obsessed with padding their own wallets at everyone else's expense, Phipps laments, also pointing to the aggressive raids by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, in Chicago. The Trump administration defends these actions with what critics call fabricated or distorted claims about rising crime rates. It's outrageous to see people dragged from their homes who've lived here for 20 or 30 years, he argues. My Mexican neighbors were next door for 41 years. They became some of my dearest friends. We built a community together, celebrating life's highs and lows side by side, always there for each other in times of need or loss. Drawing parallels, Phipps sees echoes of his Mississippi upbringing in today's treatment of immigrants. The hardships Mexican Americans and people of color face now mirror what we've endured since 1619, especially under Jim Crow laws in the South, he explains. For those new to this history, 1619 marks the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in America, setting the stage for centuries of racial oppression. Back then, challenging discriminatory laws could mean deadly retaliation, like being lynched or dumped in a river. I feel their pain deeply, Phipps adds, because it's the same fight for dignity we've been waging all along. This sentiment captures the rallying cry of the No Kings movement. We rejected kings back then, and we're rejecting them now. Major U.S. labor unions, including the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, and the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, are spearheading these efforts, with over 2,600 events planned across all 50 states. Randy Weingarten, president of the AFT, emphasizes why this matters. Unions know that having a voice on the job empowers everyday people in the workplace, she says. And a voice in our democracy empowers working folks in society as a whole. These are the core pillars of power for ordinary citizens. We and the labor movement believe that freedom hinges on having a voice. Without it, freedom is just an illusion. But here's where it gets controversial. Prominent Republicans and Trump officials are labeling these protests as hate America gatherings, a stark contrast to how they hailed the January 6 Capitol rioters as patriots. Republican Congressman Tom Emmer even accused Democrats of caving to a pro-terrorist faction by insisting on Medicaid fixes and subsidy extensions. Is this fair, or is it a dangerous double standard that stifles dissent? Weingarten counters that the protests are a direct response to Trump's power abuses, voicing outrage over unaddressed issues like skyrocketing grocery and healthcare costs. I cherish America and hate it when my patriotism is questioned, just for wanting our nation's promises to be real for everyone, she declares. That's what labor stands for, ensuring those ideals benefit our members, their families, and the communities we serve. Our founders were rebels who declared, "No kings for us," and 249 years later, we're reaffirming that message. Weingarten continues, America has evolved in many ways, but our rejection of monarch-like rule remains steadfast. Jamie Contreras, Executive Vice President of SEIU 32BJ, which represents 185,000 janitors, security officers, airport workers, and other service employees along the East Coast, echoes this. The true danger to our country isn't peaceful demonstrators, it's politicians halting government to shield billionaires and corporate interests, he states. It's ironic how they brand peaceful protesters as terrorists while calling those who trashed the Capitol patriots. On October 18th, SEIU members will take to the streets nationwide for No Kings events. Because America belongs to the people, the working people, not to elite billionaires or self-styled rulers in our democracy. As we wrap up this deep dive into a movement blending personal history with collective action, it's hard not to ponder, are these protests a heroic stand for freedom, or are they unfairly maligned as unpatriotic? Do you see the parallels Phipps draws as valid or overblown? And what about the irony in labeling protesters versus rioters? Does that reveal a broader hypocrisy in our politics? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with the union's stance, or do you have a different take? Let's keep the conversation going. After all, in a democracy, voices like yours are what keep the dialogue alive.